Hello and welcome to our little watercolor demonstration. I'm Sarah Simon of The Mint Gardener, and we're going to be painting a lovely little peony botanical today. I'm so honored to be doing this with Parachute Home. We wanted to create a piece that you could play with, do at home, not feel too stressed out about not having just the right materials, but give you an opportunity to watercolor and play. And we're just going to dive right in. The most important thing that you learn with watercolor is that you're actually working with about 80% water and 20% paint. So as you're creating and getting these paints ready to play with, you actually create this lovely little magic sauce, is what I like to call it, on your palette first. Notice I'm using my favorite little dinner plates, and I'm creating this magic sauce that's about 80% water and 20% paint. I did burnt sienna, and then I did a little mixture of the red, which is an alizarin crimson, yellow ochre, and white, which creates this lovely blush color that we're going to be playing with. I've got my nice round brushes ready to go, and I've got a jar of water also and a paper towel. Paper towels are always good to have on the side. And this is your piece that you will have traced. So you've got the lines from me. It's a lovely peony, and it's best if you trace it onto watercolor paper as we're going to be adding the paint. And watercolor paper is really made to hold water. It lets water sit above its surface so that the paint can dance and move. So we're going to take kind of a modern, fun approach to this piece. Notice I am adding water first, and now I'm going to drop in color. All right. Paint moves to water in watercolor. So you'll find as you make that line with the watercolor paint that because the water beneath it is giving it that movement and shine, and then you're adding the movement and shine from your plate palette, the paint starts to dance on the paper. So your paintbrush is really just a vehicle to suggest where you think the paint should go. So notice I lead with the water. I paint the paper first in water, and then I dab in the paint. And really, paint moves again where water goes. So if you want a little bit of color in certain spots, start with the water and then dab in the paint, okay? And this technique is actually called wet in wet. So you're using wet paint on wet paper, and you have the chance to just kind of suggest where color should go, which is really the most lovely thing about watercolor. Notice I'm just kind of picking around. I'm not worried too much about staying in these lines because we've drawn such distinct botanical lines. The nice thing is that even when this is dry and the paint is dry over it, you'll still see the lovely lines. Okay, here we are. I'm dropping in a little bit of water, and this adds a really pretty effect at the end where it just kind of bleeds out in veins. I like to call it fireworks. You can use your brush to kind of sweep off to the side. Notice I'm drying its bristles, and I'm using it a bit like a broom. Notice how when I do that, it actually takes some of the paint out because it creates a thirsty brush, and the brush actually soaks in any excess water or paint. And here I'm just going to dab in a few more because my paper is still wet. That first wet moisture that I added to it is still there. I'm able to still dab in color. And here I'm just using my paper towel to pick up any excess. And this is where you get to play a little bit with watercolor. It's really a game. It's a bit of a dance to kind of decide what you like and to play with different materials. And speaking of different materials, we're going to play a bit with a Cray Pass, which is it's a fun little crayon. Sakura of America makes them just like the Micron that I like to use. And I'm just going to play with a wiggly line. The cool thing about modern work is it's interpretive. So I like to think of those little dots as the ants that always accompany a peony flower in the garden. And that squiggle is really just maybe a spider web or some of the beauty that is often found around peonies. They're green botanicals, which we have completely left off, right? In this palette, can be represented by that really pretty gray little pastel line. So here I am just practicing mark making. A smaller round gives you a bit more control, so I'm going to switch to that for the little black lines, little black dot lines. But for the little crayon, you can use this. You can also use a regular crayon at home if that's what you have. Do a fun little squiggle and don't be hard on yourself. I invite you to play. It's interpretive, it's playful. If you're a little nervous about messing up your piece because you've done it so beautifully, you can always do a regular pencil beforehand and then draw with your crayon after. There I'm just showing you the texture that you're working with. I just poured out that Payne's gray, which is one of my absolute favorite colors, because in its very concentrated form, it's a deep, rich color. When you water it down, it turns into this beautiful bluish gray navy. But I like to keep it in the concentrated form because then I could do the little dots. It's this fun interpretation of ants. I hope you have enjoyed this lovely piece. I would love to see your peonies and what you create with this lovely collaboration. Please be sure to tag us and show us what you've done. Oh yes, and here I wanted to show you really quick, because everybody makes mistakes, right? The way to get out mistakes. It's always nice to know, right? So I've taken just clear water from my mason jar and I'm doing a side-to-side brushing motion with my paintbrush. And then I'm using my paper towel to press firmly into the wet area I've just created and dab out the mistake. So just in case you make any mistakes, now you know how to fix them, because in art there are no mistakes, only happy accidents, as Mr. Bob Ross likes to tell us. Thanks so much. I hope you've enjoyed this lovely piece, and I cannot wait to see what you create.